My name is Isabel Hart, and I've spent most of my life being underestimated, especially by family. But nothing hit quite as sharply as what my Aunt Vivian said that night at the dinner table. It was a warm spring evening, and we were gathered at my parents' house for Sunday dinner. My younger cousin had just announced her engagement, her third in 5 years. Everyone was gushing, glasses clinking, laughter echoing through the room. I was genuinely happy for her. I clapped. I even stood to hug her. Then Aunt Vivian looked at me, head tilted, wineglass in hand, and laughed. "She'll never get married," she said, gesturing toward me like I was a punchline. "I mean, let's be honest. Some people just aren't cut out for love." Silence fell, but it was the kind of silence that made you feel smaller, not seen. My mother chuckled nervously. My cousin looked away, and I smiled. I always smile when I'm hurting. But later that night, when I was alone in my apartment, I stared at myself in the mirror and let every suppressed word fall with my tears. I wasn't bitter. I was exhausted, of proving my worth, of pretending her words didn't sting. Let me tell you about Aunt Vivian. She's the queen bee of our family, the woman everyone tiptoes around, sharp-tongued, immaculately dressed, and utterly convinced she knows best. She married young, divorced quickly, and has had a trail of broken relationships since. Her favorite pastime? Mocking those who don't live life by her script. And me? I'm 32. I'm a freelance writer with a quiet life and a strong circle of friends. I've dated, I've loved, and yes, I've also been heartbroken. But never once did I feel incomplete, until she said it out loud. The next few days were hard, not because I believed her, but because I feared others did. That maybe I was a disappointment. That maybe, despite my independence and strength, people still saw me as less for not being chosen. But then came a message, a name from the past. Daniel Carter, Aunt Vivian's ex-boyfriend from 5 years ago. The man she dated briefly, flaunted at family barbecues, and then discarded when he wouldn't leave his job in real estate to start a company with her. He'd been kind, quiet, and surprisingly grounded. Nothing like her chaos. Hey, Isabel. This might sound strange, but I saw something the other day that reminded me of you. I hadn't spoken to him since a backyard barbecue, where we shared a deep chat over burgers and beer, while Vivian was busy showing off her heels. But he always seemed like the only real adult in that circus of ego. We messaged for hours that first night. Then came the coffee meetup, then brunch, then long walks, then laughter, deep, real laughter I hadn't felt in years. At first, I hesitated. He was my aunt's ex. Would that be messy? Yes. But was he genuinely interested in me? Absolutely. And I couldn't deny the butterflies. When I finally told my best friend, she screamed. This is like something out of a movie. If you don't go for it, I will. Still, part of me feared Aunt Vivian's wrath. The woman who once told me I'd die alone wouldn't handle this news with grace. But I wasn't that same insecure girl crying in front of the mirror anymore. 2 months later, at a family dinner eerily similar to the one before, Daniel and I walked in, hand in hand. And what happened next? Let's just say, Aunt Vivian should have swallowed before sipping her wine. Daniel's hand gripped mine gently but firmly as we walked through the familiar front door of my parents' home. Sunday dinner again. Only this time, I wasn't coming in alone. I heard the clatter of cutlery and soft jazz playing in the background. My mother's signature rosemary chicken was in the air. The dining room buzzed with polite conversation, but as soon as we stepped into view, the entire room paused, like someone had hit mute on reality. And then I saw her. Aunt Vivian, in her usual spot at the end of the table, swirling a glass of red like she was starring in her own movie. Her eyes locked on Daniel's face, then slid down to our intertwined hands. She blinked once, twice, then raised her wine glass for a sip, only to choke halfway through as the reality settled in. She coughed violently, staining the linen napkin with a splash of red. My cousin rushed to pat her back, but she swatted. The gesture away, waving off concern as she stared at me like I had just stabbed her through the heart. No one said a word. It was Daniel who broke the silence. "Evening, everyone. Thank you for having me." He nodded with that calm, respectful tone that only made the whole thing sting more for her, because it wasn't just that I walked in with someone, it was him. The man she once bragged about. The man she dismissed. The air was heavy with discomfort and curiosity. My mother stood awkwardly, her expression flickering between confusion and fear. "Isabel, you didn't say you were bringing a guest." "I didn't want to make a scene," I replied softly, squeezing Daniel's hand before looking straight at Vivian. "But I thought it was time I introduced someone special." The cow? Words hit like a slow bullet. My father tried to redirect the tension. "Well, there's always room at the table." But no one reached for their wine. No one laughed. All eyes were on Vivian, waiting for her reaction, and she didn't disappoint. Her smile was tight, too tight. "How quaint," she said, slowly. "Didn't know you two even knew each other that well." Daniel looked right at her and said, "We reconnected, and I realized something I never really saw back then." He turned to me with warmth in his eyes. That the most real person at those gatherings wasn't the one talking the loudest. A flush spread across her face, but she masked it with a laugh. "Well, I always said you had interesting taste." But her hands were trembling. She kept reaching for her glass, only to put it down again. Her control, her polished, dominant social command, was slipping. Dinner was awkward, to say the least. Every story, every shared laugh came with a tension threaded beneath it. Vivian tried several times to reclaim the spotlight, tossing passive-aggressive comments toward me. "I suppose some women settle when they get older," or "recycling exes is a bold move." I smiled. For once, her words didn't pierce. They bounced off me like dull arrows, because this wasn't about her anymore. Daniel and I shared glances, secret smiles. Under the table, he gently rested his hand on my thigh for reassurance. And when dessert came out, I did something I hadn't done in years. I toasted. I stood, lifted my glass, and said, "To unexpected turns, and to finding something real, even in the unlikeliest places." Vivian raised her brows. "That's certainly one way to look at it." Then, just as everyone started to ease back into conversation, Daniel reached into his jacket pocket. My heart stopped. He stood, turned toward me, and pulled out a small velvet box. Gasps echoed around the table. My cousin's jaw dropped. My mother's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "Aunt Vivian?" She went pale. "I know it's soon," Daniel said, "but I also know what I want. Isabel, will you marry me?" And right there, in the very room where I was once mocked for being unlovable, I said yes. As I turned to face the woman who told the world I'd never get married, I watched her face crumble behind that wine glass. And that, my friends, was the moment she truly choked on more than just her drink. For a full 5 seconds, the room stood frozen, like everyone was waiting for a second punchline. But there wasn't one. I had just said yes. And when Daniel slipped the ring onto my finger, something strange happened. My heart didn't race with panic. It swelled with peace. I looked up at him, at the man who chose me for who I was, and not for who I pretended to be. His eyes weren't clouded by ego or convenience. They were clear, calm, and full of intent. The sound of clapping jolted everyone back into motion. My mom was the first to stand and hug us, though she was clearly still stunned. My dad gave Daniel a hearty handshake, then muttered something like, "Well, this is definitely memorable." My cousin, bless her, tried to save face by saying, "Congratulations. Wow, love really finds a way, huh?" But her glance toward Aunt Vivian gave away what she really wanted to know. How was the Queen of Shade going to handle this one? Vivian sat stiffly in her chair, holding her wine glass like it was her last weapon. Her face was blank, but in that hollow way that told you a storm was raging just beneath. She didn't clap, she didn't speak, she didn't blink. Her pride was louder than the moment itself, and it was collapsing in slow motion. Finally, she exhaled, looked directly at me, and said, "This is certainly unexpected. I suppose congratulations are in order, though I do wonder what made you the right one this time." That smile of hers, it was all lip, no joy. I didn't flinch. I met her stare and replied, maybe it's because I never tried to change him, or maybe because I wasn't too busy trying to prove I was better than everyone else. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, clearly not one for confrontation, but I was done shrinking in her shadow. For once, I wasn't going to let her words rewrite my worth. Vivian stood abruptly. "Excuse me," she muttered, grabbing her purse. "I need some air." She left the room like a gust of wind had pulled her out. Not another word. And in her absence, something strange happened. The energy shifted. Lighter, warmer, as if the pressure valve had been released. My mother looked relieved. My cousin, though awkward, asked genuine questions about our relationship. Daniel told the story of how we reconnected at a bookstore, both reaching for the same copy of a novel about second chances. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. As dessert was served, I leaned back in my chair and took it all in. The candles flickering gently, the clink of forks, my ring catching the light. I thought back to that night just 2 months earlier, the one where I'd cried, alone in my apartment, wondering if I was destined to always be the family's invisible one, the one mocked for being too quiet, too picky, too late. But tonight, I wasn't invisible. Tonight, I was seen. Later in the kitchen, while helping with dishes, my mom turned to me. "Are you sure, Isabel? I mean, your aunt isn't wrong. It's fast." I nodded. "Yes, it's fast, but it's real." She looked down at the ring, then at me. "He seems different with you." "He is," I whispered, "and I'm different with him." Because this wasn't about revenge, not really. It wasn't about proving anything to Aunt Vivian or anyone else. It was about claiming joy, the kind of joy that doesn't ask for permission or validation. Still, I knew this wasn't the end of it. Vivian wouldn't let this go quietly. And I wasn't naive enough to think the worst was over. But I also knew something else. No matter what storm she tried to summon next, I had already won. Because I chose love, not out of desperation, but out of power. And nothing unsettles us, narcissist, more than watching the woman they mocked become the woman they could never be. The next morning, my phone lit up at 6:12 a.m. with a message that made me sit straight up in bed. "Vivian, coffee. Today. Just us. 11 a.m. at La Mariposa. No emojis. No congratulations. Just a command." I showed Daniel the message. He rubbed his eyes and groaned. "Should I be worried you're walking into an ambush?" I smiled weakly. "If I don't go, she'll twist it as guilt. If I do, I'll finally say what I've needed to say for years." He kissed my forehead. "Then go. But don't let her drag you into her chaos." La Mariposa was her kind of place, pretentious and overpriced, with tiny cups and loud whispers. She was already seated when I arrived, pristine as ever in a white blazer, red nails and sunglasses she didn't take off even as she sipped her espresso. I slid into the seat across from her, heart steady. I'd imagined this moment before, but this time I wasn't here to defend. I was here to finish something. She lowered her glasses and said flatly, "Well, that was quite a performance last night." "I didn't realize saying yes to a proposal was theater," I replied, folding my hands calmly. "Oh, please, Isabel, don't pretend you didn't enjoy watching me squirm." I didn't answer that. She was right, but not for the reason, she thought. Watching her squirm didn't make me happy. Watching her lose control of a narrative she never owned in the first place? That was justice. Vivian leaned in. "Let me be clear. I don't care who you date. But my ex? Really?" "He wasn't yours," I said evenly. "You discarded him like a bad outfit. He deserves more than that. And frankly, so do I." Her laugh was hollow. "So this is revenge? After all these years of being overlooked, poor Isabel finally gets her turn?" "No," I said. "This is me living my life. And if that bothers you, maybe it's time you asked yourself why." She went quiet, her expression unreadable. Then she said something I didn't expect. "You were always the safe one, the invisible one, the one who'd never threaten the room." I blinked. "Excuse me?" She swirled her spoon in her coffee. "Every family has one. The nice girl. The one who listens more than she speaks. You were comfortable being the background. Until now. It hit me like a slap, because it was true. I had allowed that role. I made myself small so I wouldn't be seen as a threat, especially around her. But the moment I stepped into the spotlight, she couldn't handle it. I straightened. Maybe I was comfortable in the background, but that doesn't mean I belonged. There. Vivian narrowed her eyes. You think he loves you? Give it time. Men like him. Stable, sweet, boring. They chase fireworks when the candle burns out. There it was. Her poison. Softly delivered, but deadly. I stood up slowly. Thank you for meeting me, Vivian. Truly. I needed to see this one last time. But this narrative where I'm less than you? That ends today. She looked up, caught off guard by the calm in my voice. You see, I used to think you were the woman I needed to earn respect from. But now I realize I never needed your permission to be happy. I just needed to stop waiting for your applause. Left before she could respond. The sunlight outside hit my face like a reward, and for the first time in years, I felt weightless. Later that evening, Daniel and I sat on our balcony, watching the city below glow with life. I saw her today, I said. He looked at me with concern. Are you okay? I'm more than okay, I said, resting my head on his shoulder. I finally saw her for who she is. He kissed the top of my head. And who are you? I smiled. The woman she never thought I'd become. And in that moment, I knew her war wasn't mine to fight anymore, because I wasn't trying to win. I already had. The silence after that coffee meeting should have been a warning. Vivian didn't text. She didn't call. She didn't show up at the next family dinner. For 2 weeks, there was nothing but eerie quiet. My mom tried to fill the silence with awkward attempts at small talk. Did you pick a florist yet? While my cousin sent me vague memes about forgiveness and family always coming around. But I knew better. Aunt Vivian wasn't the kind to retreat out of acceptance. No, her silence was a coil pulling tighter. And then came the engagement party. My parents insisted on hosting it. Just family, they said. Keep it simple. Keep it peaceful. But Vivian showed up anyway, draped in a gold gown too glamorous for the occasion, with perfect waves in her hair and a gift bag clutched in her manicured hand. You could feel the tension ripple across the backyard as soon as she stepped in. My mother froze mid-conversation. My cousin whispered something to her fiancé. Daniel reached for my hand instinctively. But Vivian? She just smiled, wide and polished, like she'd never spat venom in her life. Darling, she chirped, walking right up to me like we were best friends. You look beautiful. Engaged life suits you. I blinked. Thanks. Wasn't sure you'd come. She handed me the gift bag. Of course I came. Family first, right? Her tone was sweet, sickeningly so. She turned to Daniel. You clean up well. Thanks, he said coolly. She floated around the party like nothing had ever happened, laughing, complimenting, charming the older relatives who didn't know the full story. It was a performance, and a good one. But I knew it was leading to something. And I was right. Right as Daniel's best friend raised a toast to us, Vivian clinked her fork against a glass and stood. I hope you don't mind, she said, but I'd love to say something about the bride-to-be. I felt the breath stall in my chest. She turned to the crowd, her voice syrupy. You know, I've watched Isabel grow up, and I have to admit, I never thought I'd see her find someone who truly understood her. A few chuckles, a few confused looks. But I suppose Daniel always did enjoy quiet women, ones who don't overshadow him. The room shifted. Daniel stiffened beside me, but I gently touched his arm. Let her finish. I just hope, she continued, smiling at the guests, that this time it lasts. Then she sat. No further explanation, just a sugar-coated dagger left to bleed in the air. My hand was shaking slightly as I picked up my champagne glass. I stood, turned to the same guests and said, Thank you all for being here. I wasn't sure how this night would go, but I can tell you one thing. I'm not the same girl I was a year ago. I glanced at Vivian. She held her glass to her lips, eyes narrowed. I used to believe I needed people's approval to feel seen. But I've realized something far more valuable. Peace doesn't need permission. And love? Love isn't loud or cruel or condescending. It's kind, and it shows up, even when others don't want it to. There was a pause. Then clapping. Real clapping. From Daniel's friends, from my parents, even from my cousin. Vivian just sipped her wine, her expression unreadable. After the toast, I opened her gift. It was a wedding planner book, with most of the pages already filled in. Her name was scribbled across sample seating charts, mock menus, venue locations, even honeymoon ideas, all from her past. She hadn't bought me something. She had recycled her dreams, an artifact from her failed engagement with Daniel, wrapped in tissue paper and ego. I looked at Daniel, who stared at it with a strange mixture of pity and disgust. I think she wanted us to see it, he said. And I realized he was right. It wasn't a gift. It was a reminder. She had him first. But I didn't flinch. I calmly placed the book back in the bag, handed it to my mom and said, "Please donate this." Vivian's smile faltered for the first time that night. Because her final shot had missed, and I hadn't even raised a shield. I didn't need to. I was already standing taller than she ever expected. A week after the engagement party, I got a message from my cousin. "Rachel, you might want to check Aunt Viv's Facebook." Now, I don't usually involve myself in social media drama, but something told me this wasn't just petty gossip. I opened the app and braced myself. There it was, Vivian's latest post, a selfie, wine glass in hand, makeup flawless, with the caption, "Some women are born wives, others just borrow your leftovers." Over 100 likes, mostly from her socialite friends. Comments flooded in, asking who she was throwing shade at, but the answer was clear. Me. I could have laughed, could have cried, but I did neither. I just stared at it and thought, this is her final unraveling, because nothing screams wounded louder than trying to reclaim dignity with emojis and cryptic captions. I didn't respond, didn't post a counter message, didn't text her. I simply took a deep breath and closed the app. A few hours later, Daniel found me in the kitchen, kneading dough with more force than necessary. "She posted it, didn't she?" he asked, already knowing. I nodded. "She's not angry because we're happy," I said. "She's angry because I didn't need her blessing to be." Daniel took the rolling pin from my hand, kissed my knuckles, and said, "Let's go for a walk." We ended up in the park, where we'd had our first real date after reconnecting. The air was soft and cool, the trees alive with early summer. Light. He held my hand like it was still new to him, and I realized something. I wasn't afraid of being seen anymore. "You know," I said, "there was a time when I would have done anything for her approval. Her praise felt like currency, rare, and always conditional." Daniel looked at me. "Do you still want it?" I shook my head, not even a little. And that was the moment I knew I had truly let go. Let go of the girl who used to fold herself into corners at family dinners. Let go of the fear that being unmarried meant being unworthy. Let go of the belief that someone else's bitterness defined my value. A few days later, I ran into Aunt Vivian unexpectedly at a cafe. She was alone, sunglasses off this time, makeup slightly smudged, scrolling endlessly through her phone. She looked up. Our eyes met. She opened her mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to strike again, but I didn't give her the chance. I smiled, nodded politely, and walked past her. That tiny moment, me walking by with grace, hurt more than any retaliation ever could. Because in her world, silence isn't peace, it's power. And I had taken all of mine back. We got married 5 months later. A small, beautiful ceremony with people who actually loved us. No drama, no speeches soaked in sarcasm, no toxic shadows hovering over vows. My aunt didn't attend. She wasn't invited. And you know what? When I walked down the aisle, I didn't think about her once. Because love isn't about proving your worth to those who never saw it. It's about sharing it with someone who always did. Vivian laughed once and said I'd never get married. Well, she was wrong. I didn't just get married. I walked down the aisle with the man she once thought wasn't good enough for her and who turned out to be perfect for me. And as for her, she can keep her wine, her whispers, and her captions. Keep my joy, because it's mine now, and no one can choke it down.